If Boston College was looking for experience at defensive coordinator, they certainly found it. But will he work at BC? Well, let's dive in at Ted Roof.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and details on your Eagles, you are in the right place. Locked On Boston College is a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. On today's show, we have a lot to talk about. Deuce Knight enters the transfer portal. I'll explain why BC might be in good position for that. A big weekend for OVs. Is that going to be enough to overtake some of the losses that BC had? And BC finally names a new defensive coordinator. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of this action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. All right, let's dive into this. And to get into all this discussion, we needed to bring in an extra voice. And to do that, we brought in Mitch Wolf of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
I was having a nice holiday. And then BC Sports continued to ruin it, as they have done with most of my life for the past few months.
So let's dive.
Great.
Let's get into the opening volley of news, which was we finally, after a month, found out who the new defensive coordinator was. It's not going to be Al Washington. It's not going to be John Butler. It's going to be Ted Roof. Ted Roof is a longtime defensive coordinator who had experience with Bill O'Brien at a number of stops, Duke, Georgia Tech, and Penn State, correct?
Mm-hmm.
He's been around a long time. He was part of the Auburn 2010 national championship team, or 2011. And
the game was played in 11, but 2010 season.
2010, and has bounced around quite a bit. Now, Mitch, let's get into your thoughts on this. Where is this in terms of compared to Tim Lewis?
I think it's kind of roughly the same, honestly. I think, say Ted Roof has been a journeyman, puts it lightly. This guy has been everywhere, basically east of Mississippi, and he very rarely stays more than a year. 10 times in his coaching career, he has been at a school for 1 year or less and then left without changing. And sometimes he'll stay. He'll be there for a year, but he'll change. He'll get promoted to being a defensive coordinator. That's only happened 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 times he's gone somewhere. He's there for a year and then he's gone within that's at least his last job with UCF. He didn't even make it to November. He got fired as defensive coordinator. He's an older defensive coordinator. I don't think his scheme is translating as of late. I mean, he got essentially ran out of Oklahoma after 2 years there, where they were coming off the Alex Grinch years, which that should tell you something, because that was a very frustrating time at Oklahoma because of Grinch's funky system and how much it allows big plays and allows offenses to kind of do whatever they want when the other team has, superior talent. And Roof didn't really improve that. If you look at the stats from that year, so I'm looking at when Oklahoma played against Power 4 teams. So it's not every game we're taking out FCS. We're taking out when they would play Temple or whatever, when they have a significant talent advantage, because Oklahoma does. And that's the problem, is that at a place where he should have very good talent, and granted, and this was still when they were in the Big 12. So they were one of the premier programs in that conference. But if you look at their statistics from that time, it's not a very good defensive operation. They allowed, I think, the second most yardage in 2023 and 2022 combined out of all Power 4 teams when they played against Power 4 teams. I'm just going to make sure I have the number right. Yeah, so it's 56 out of 57. The only team that allowed more yards against only Power 4 team that allowed more yards against Power 4 opponents was Vanderbilt. Points per game, they allowed 30.6 points a game against Power 4 opponents, which was 43rd out of 57. And they allowed, let me pull this up, explosive plays were a big problem for this defense when he was there. They allowed the 13th highest explosive play rate. So usually you go and reverse it, but that's bad. 13.6% of plays were explosive plays, which depending on how you measure that, but typically I think it's 16 plus yards for passes, 12 plus yards for rushes. They actually were, let me see, they were 48th out of 57 in opponent rushes that opponent explosive rushes at 11.9%, and that was actually worse than BC was in 2022 and 2023 combined. So, and if you look at their EPA and success rate, they're a little better, a little more towards the middle, but they're still average or below average. So I'm not really enthused by this hire. If you look at Roof's, he kind of racks up tackles for loss and turnovers, but turnovers can be a bit fluky. I think the tackles for loss really come against when they have superior talent. And they're playing like not power 4 teams. So I'm just not really all that enthused by this hire. This is somebody who Bill O'Brien clearly has a close relationship with. So at least you could argue he has that over Tim Lewis, who was a guy Bill O'Brien hadn't really worked with in the past. But this is a guy who has just bounced around. And to me, that says this is a guy who doesn't really endear himself well, or doesn't really show that he's a great coordinator by sticking in one place. The longest time he's ever been in a job was, I think he was at Georgia Tech for 4 years, and that was his second time around from 2013 to 2017. He was there. So in a coaching career that's like 35 years long, and he's only been at one place for 5 years, that's his longest tenure. That's a problem for me, because it's like a guy that is good at his job should be sticking around places for longer than that, or it should be, if you're bouncing around places, you should be consistently moving upwards. And he was, bouncing around. He'd get to an SEC job and then he'd fall back down, and then go to that place like Oklahoma. And then last year he went to, or 2 years ago actually, he went to UCF because he didn't coach in 2025. And when he went to UCF, he got fired like 2/3 of the way through the year. So I'm very much not enthused by this hire. I think it represents a continued failing of this coaching staff and administration program, everything, to not be innovative, to keep running back the same old ideas, not adapting to what the college game is now. You're hiring a 62-year-old defensive coordinator who has just bounced around jobs for almost all of his career. Like, I don't really see how that helps with recruiting, helps with retaining talent, which we'll get into as that being a big problem. But I just don't really see this as this move is very concerning for me for the future of this program and this staff.
Does Ted Roof, is there any positives to what he does on a defensive scheme? Is there anything?
I haven't done a ton of research into that. I'll do that in the coming weeks, I guess. But I think there is like an aggressive penetrating style. Like, they do get some tackles for losses. They do find ways to hunt some turnovers. But again, I'm not sure that that's really a schematic thing. It might just be an attitude thing, which is good. I think that could be helpful, but I don't see the implementation of a schematic identity that you can find with some other defensive coaches. Like, even if so for example, one would be two guys who just retired, actually. John Haycock, who was the defensive coordinator at Iowa State for a long time. They ran that 3-3-5 defense. And Randy Bates, who was the defensive coordinator at Pitt for a long time. And they ran that base press quarters defense. And those guys, the scheme has its flaws, but it's like, we know what we're going to do. We're going to do it all the time, and we're going to execute it well. And for the most part, both those teams did, even though they were relatively unorthodox schemes. And you could even say the same thing about Alex Grinch, who I mentioned earlier. But I'm not really sure Roof has that. I'll find out when I look more into the film of his defense and look up some stats about their schematic usages. I just don't really, just based on what he's done over the last few decades, I just don't see this as being a revolutionary hire that's going to right the course of this program.
Right. Yep. And I think the other pieces are going to have to really jump in to fix this program before coach is, right? Like, you need the talent here to do it in order to win football games. And right now, we're going to talk about in just a moment, they lost a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And right now we're kind of in this limbo where we don't know what this roster is even going to look like next year, because you've lost 20 players to the transfer portal and all your graduating seniors and grad students. And I honestly don't even know the numbers of that. You're looking at almost 40 to 50% of your roster potentially being gone.
Yeah.
Right?
And Bill O'Brien said on his podcast, we're looking at bringing 15 to 20 transfers.
He said 10 to 15.
10. Oh, buddy, you got to get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers. Like, you're not going to be able to field a roster if that's all you're bringing in. Like, that's not enough. Like, looking at the depth chart now, obviously they're going to bring in guys and that'll help fill it out. But there are positions where you are one injury away from starting true freshmen for a lot of snaps. And we saw last year that is a big problem. So we'll get into it.
Well, I will tell you, we'll start off the next segment with some good news, but we'll also field into where things are at with the transfer portal. But I have a little nugget I want to share with you guys going into next segment, and we'll get into that in just a moment. There's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkpoint. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experience it. It's just a few taps. I opened the Game Time app to look at college football games. I was looking at that UConn BC game. I needed 9 tickets, got them easily, got them all together, knew exactly where I was sitting. The tickets were cheap. It was great. And I got a zone deal as well that got my families there. And the best part, tickets were sent to me before I even got to the game, had them all in my Apple wallet, and it was ready to roll. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Thank you for making Locked On Boston College your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. You're going to get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Boston College, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major app. Plus, you get a Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. We have close to 1,000 members on there right now. It's crazy. You need to come over and join it and start talking BC football over there. I'm over there. You can join that. So go to supercast.lockedonbostoncollege.com, and you can get signed up to become part of our Everydayers Club today. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here of Eagle Insider. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College part of your daily routine. And we're going to talk about, I want to give you a quick little nugget here before Mitch and I talk about the things that have been happening. This first weekend. So for folks that are wondering, I did a whole diatribe about this 2 days ago, where I said this new portal system as a fan of college sports is really, really tough, because you hear about all the players leaving, all the players entering the portal, and then you get no good news on the other end. Like, you're just stuck with your roster being, a quarter of what it was and no positives to know about. And when you're 2-10 and having all this, negative, feelings about your team, it makes it even worse. So I can tell you, I talked to some sources of mine. This weekend is supposed to be a huge weekend for BC football in terms of official visits. They're going to have a ton of transfer portal players coming on campus. I don't know who they are because I can't know, because it's tampering, because it doesn't open until January 2nd. But I've been told it's going to be big. So we'll have to wait to see what that looks like. I'm just telling you what I've been told. So a source of mine told me that earlier in the day. Now, Mitch, hopefully that's good. I think a lot of folks are hoping, and myself including, that we're going to see some players come back that can play, because what you lost hurts.
Yeah, it's really bad. This is a catastrophic DEFCON 1 situation. BC is losing essentially their entire offensive production apparatus. They are losing their top 6 snap earners from last year and 12 of their top 16 snap earners from the previous season. Obviously, some of those are graduation. Lewis Bond, Logan Taylor, Jude Bowery leaves early for the draft, but you're losing some very valuable young up-and-coming players. Turbo Richard, Reed Harris, even Eric Stockerty, who, again, wasn't perfect last year, but he was a first-year starter. There's a lot of cycling in the offensive line, especially around him. Think about switching from Dwayne Alec to Michael Krauts, and for what it's worth, Dwayne Alec was very bad, point blank period. And Bowery obviously was in and out of the lineup with injuries. So, and Doherty had injuries himself, but I thought he got better for the most part as the season went on. And as we've seen with this program, when you lose competent starters, and again, I'm not saying Bowery was an all ACC player, but when he was a competent starter, especially by the end of the year, when you lose players like that, it's generally pretty hard to replace them when you're in a position like BC, in terms of they're not always getting tons of talent coming in. And we've seen this with the offensive line in years past, namely 2022, where, they lose a ton of guys to graduation, they lose some guys to injury, and it all falls apart. And now BC is losing 4 of their 5 starters from the past year, and even Michael Krauts wasn't a week 1 starter. So you're looking at guys who were backups who rotated in, like Robert Smith, Judah Pruitt, Papa Isai, and Ryan McCow being the starters next year. And that's a huge question mark. And especially after the way this offensive line performed last year, when they did have these veteran starters and they weren't that good until, very late in the season, that's a problem. And then looking at guys like Reed Harris and Turbo Richard, who were major explosive threats for this offense that couldn't get a lot done had some issues with down-to-down efficiency, but when those guys were humming, they were getting some stuff together. And now those guys are gone. And again, Reed Harris wasn't a perfect player, but I was putting something together to evaluate him, but I wisely, apparently, held my powder on it because I was worried that he would enter the portal. And even though this seemed to be a surprise to BC, that ended up happening. And I was looking through BC's history, and if you think about receivers in BC's history, there's probably about a handful that you can absolutely say we're better than Reed Harris. And so it goes something like Zay Flowers, Lewis Bond, Alex Amadon, Rich Gunnell, Will Blackman. And I'm saying in the last 25 years. So we're not going way in the past when they didn't really when people didn't really throw the football as much. And then looking at the next tier of guys, you look at Kobe White, Jeff Smith, CJ Lewis, Michael Walker, Joseph Griffin for a bit. And then guys going way back, Brandon Robinson, Grant Adams, Larry Lester. I feel like Reed Harris was better or just as good as all those guys in the second category, and he was ascending. He took a major leap from 2024 to 2023, where in 2024, he was just kind of almost like a gadget player. And even at the end of the season, you saw him develop. This year, he takes this huge leap where he's, this downfield threat. They struggled to get him the ball sometimes, but when they did, he was a major threat, and now he's gone. Turbo Richard didn't have the best year. Some of it was injuries to him. Obviously, the offensive line was struggling earlier in the year, but when they got the offensive line cooking, he was a huge play threat, and he was efficient and explosive. Very good catching the ball, really developed his pass blocker this year, and now he's gone. And 247's experts have him crystal to Indiana, where I think he'll go ballistic in that scheme if he ends up there, because he is perfect for that. So, and now you're left with an extremely depleted running back room where your only returning player with meaningful experience is Bo McCormick, who was a true freshman this past year. And your wide receiver room is Jaden Skeet, who's still a major question mark, Dawson Pugh, who had some moments, but they were very few and far between, and then guys who have barely played. So your offense is just completely depleted. Not to mention the quarterbacks, who are now you're down to Shaker Reisig, who will be a redshirt freshman. So This is a disaster. I mean, and the whole thing with BC is they could hang their hat on retaining very good players and developing them. You look at guys like Zay Flowers, Donovan Ezeraku, Ozzie Trapillo, Drew Kendall, all those guys. They were like kind of rumors, like, oh, could they enter the portal? Could they get a big bag from Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, whatever? And none of them did. And Christian Mahogany in that group too. And none of them did. They all stayed at BC. They all finished their careers there as some of the best players in program history. Now players that had the opportunity to do so are leaving. And that is a major problem for BC. That is allegedly, finally getting in the rev share game. But now they don't have the money to pay up for these guys. And I'm sure that they commanded pretty high asking prices. But you are not going to find better players that want to come to BC in the portal than these guys. I'm fairly confident in that. These are guys who are going to play at high level, Power 5, Power 4 schools, even just say Power 2, Big 10 SEC schools. They're going to go big places where they're going to be major contributors. And I just don't want to see BC become one of those transition programs where they're stepping stones, for, a program like Memphis or these other schools like in the American, where guys just are there for a year and then they blow up and then they're gone. I don't want to see BC become that as a fan and somebody who covers the team now. So this is really bad. And I'm very skeptical that they can fix this, that they can improve the roster via the portal, because you need to bring in a ton of players, and the players who would be probably good enough to turn around this program and make them better than they were this past year, they're probably going to, better programs than BC. So you're getting guys that were decent at the G5 level or very good at the FCS level, and you're hoping they can make that transition, which we've seen this past year. That was pretty much a mixed bag for BC's transfer portal class. So you hope that a guy like Kenyatta Watson can flip that around with ideally a bigger staff, with a change in philosophy, but it looks pretty bleak right now. And I hope that this staff proves me wrong, but all indications right now point to this being pretty rough.
So I'm curious to see what they bring in, because they've told me they have a plan. I've talked to people, they have a plan, and Watson, one of the big things that he has. Okay, so hopefully the rev share piece is in place. Obviously, you can be skeptical about that piece, but Watson, if you ever follow who he knows and where the people that he, is connected with, it's a lot of Southern schools, obviously the Auburn connection, but he knows people from Georgia Tech. He knows people from Florida. He knows people from all those different areas. I'm wondering how many of those people he can actually get here. Because you can infuse talent if they're going to spend it. That's the thing that we need to see are they going to spend? Are they going to actually do things that BC has never done before? And that email from Blake James obviously was a start, but we haven't seen it in action yet. We haven't seen it up close and personal. So when they say that they have a big group of visitors coming, prove it. That's my saying about all this. I'm willing to say positive things about this, but you got to prove it. I've been around this program. I've been around. I'm a graduate. All that stuff. I know what BC's like. I'd be very excited if that's the case. If they're willing to change how they view this program, I'm very excited if that's the case. But I need them to prove it.
Yeah, and I mean, respectfully, like, you can't be pinning all your hopes on a D2 quarterback.
Right.
Who I looked at, and granted, I did not watch his film because I don't even think my guy can get D2 film. But I'll ask if BC ends up getting him. But
yep.
The stats that help me out with the name, Mason
McKenzie.
Yeah. If looking at his stats, it was not like he was, going Fernando Mendoza on these D2 schools. Like, there were games that were rough. So that concerns me. And he's also very small based on his listed size at a D2 school, which I'm sure is inflating his size a bit, as most schools do with the size of their players.
Yep.
So that's very concerning to me. And again, we saw this happen last year where BC went in heavy on guys coming up below, which I generally think is the better strategy, actually. I think when you get guys who have proven the ability to, play well at lower levels, okay, like they have something, and, didn't really work out for BC. I'm more skeptical of guys bumping down levels because, and granted, there's a myriad of reasons why guys aren't playing at higher level schools. There's obviously a lot more talent there, so sometimes you just don't get a shake. But I feel like you see those guys tumbling down programs more, and they kind of end up not hitting. So that other approach concerns me, and yeah, I'm just not. I just don't really have a lot of faith in what is going on right now. And I don't think I think that's fair because I don't really think I have any reason to. I don't think I have any reason to have faith. I don't think I should be expected to have faith.
Nope.
And that goes beyond this coaching staff. That goes to the program, the administration, which we've complained about. And again, the letter, which feels like a lifetime ago, we thought things would be changing. And granted, there hasn't really been an opportunity to show that things have changed. This next week, when the portal does open, we'll learn how serious BC really is.
Prove it. Right.
Exactly. That's the new, what was it? Earn it, next level, prove it.
Yeah. Prove it. Yep. They have the opportunity to, and show it to me. I'm willing to be shocked. So let's prove it. All right. In our final segment, speaking of prove it, a former 5-star that we've talked about on this podcast multiple times before enters the transfer portal. How does this shape the quarterback potential room for BC? Mitch and I will get into all of that in just a moment. Fridays already feel different during basketball season. FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right into the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. With bonuses, boosts, and surprises, you'll get everything locked into your game. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day. And if you're looking for a second listen, check out Locked On ACC. The links are over in our show notes. All right. Other big news on Tuesday was the addition of Deuce Knight, the worst kept secret in the world, to the transfer portal. Now, Auburn, if you want to see, I know they got a new head coach and it's Auburn, so they're going to be able to reload. But if you want to really watch a team get stripped down to bare parts, Auburn has had most of their roster dumped into the transfer portal with the new head coach there. But Deuce Knight is the latest. I don't think they have any quarterbacks remaining.
I would have to look, but I know I guess Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels, and Deuce Knight all entered. So yeah, they're all. But I think Byron Brown is going to come from USF. So yeah.
Well, anyways, so the latest news is Deuce Knight, and he's been linked to Boston College. Obviously, if you go to his Twitter page, it is just a love fest to Kenyatta Watson. And I think A to Z Sports. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them all that well, but I know that they do some reporting. Report that he's taking an official visit to BC this weekend. He could be part of that big group. Do you see? Would this be the kind of splash thing that would help the fan kind of get re-engaged with the team, or do you think this is not going to work?
So I think it is the kind of thing that could get fans re-engaged, where it's like, oh, we get this former 5-star. It's because he has this connection to the GM of the program, who is a BC alum. He's a very, very talented player. Had some great highlights against an FCS team. Absolutely could get the fan base engaged. Does it fix everything?
No, it does not.
Absolutely not.
No, but you can't just jump in and have one with you, as you just said in that last segment. Like, you can't have one guy's not going to fix everything with this.
No, but and even then, I just have questions about Knight, because I watched his game versus Mercer, and based on what I saw, I don't see the fit for him in Bill O'Brien's offense. Now, somebody's gonna say, "Oh, well, maybe Bill O'Brien will change his offense to fit him." It's like, well, he hasn't done that the last few years. They have incorporated some quarterback runs here and there for Grayson James and Tommy Castellanos, but most of what you've seen is Bill O'Brien's offense running the way he wants it to run, which is drop back passing, reading the defense, and not a super diverse or inventive run game. And Knight is right now, and granted, he is a young player. Quarterbacks can take big strides in development, but he very much is I need to read the defense and I need time to do it, and then I will run around and try to make plays off schedule and out of the pocket. A lot of his production against Mercer was him running the ball, and for what it's worth, he is a gazelle, like a beautiful gazelle running, like it's crazy. But throwing is a bit more of a risky proposition with him. And again, he's a young player, still figuring it out against college defenses. But where Bill O'Brien is now, I'm not sure he has the time to really develop this kind of quarterback unless they change the offense to meet Knight's skill set, which again, based on what they've done the last few years, I am questionable. I'm skeptical of that. So again, this kind of says, prove it to me. Like, what are you going to do if you get this guy? What are you going to do to make him successful? Because if you go out there and try to have him read spot Tulane, which the two option routes on one side, the spot concept on the other. If you had tried to have him do that 5 to 10 times a game, it's probably not going to go well, and he's just going to run around a lot. And I think that should be a big part of the offense. And Bill O'Brien has done that with some quarterbacks in the past. You think about.
I was thinking back to Grayson James. Would he be kind of like a Grayson James type of quarterback
probably,
in terms of what he could do?
Definitely more athletic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does make sense. And also you could think about the quarterback that Bill O'Brien had when he was with the Houston Texans, the nasty man. So so there is some precedent there, but I just have a lot of question marks with that. And again, if Knight is and Knight is coming from Auburn, where, say what you will about Hugh Freeze, and I have a lot of opinions on him, but that team had talent. Cam Coleman's incredible talent. The guy they got from Georgia Tech, Eric Singleton. Yeah. He was really good. They had some good running backs. And Connor Lew, their center, who got hurt, but he's a great center, like Xavier Chaplin, the offensive tackle. They had a good talent. What happens when he comes to BC and the talent around him is not as good, when they're playing against a lot of teams that have superior talent to him, to his team? So that's a problem. So I'm just skeptical of all this. And I did want to bring this up earlier. The one, and I don't want to say silver lining, but some other relatively semi-precious metal, the lining of this is that with all these players leaving, you are theoretically freeing up a lot of NIL money that would otherwise be used to retain those players. Now you have a lot of that money freed up. So now, like you said, you need to go out and get a lot of players to not just get talent. You need to fill out the depth of this roster, because this past year showed that once starters went down and you had to keep digging into the depth chart because of injuries, things got real bad really fast. So you need to go out there and, there's some positions where you need to go out and get 2 players just for one position. So, because your depth has been destroyed by the portal and graduation. So these are dark times for Boston College football and really Boston College sports in general. And like we've said, I need to see evidence that it's going to be fixed before I just believe in my heart of hearts that it's going to be fixed.
Right. So I
don't think that should make the coaching staff's job harder.
Right. No, I think what we're talking about here is just the way things are. And, again, as I said to start the show off, we're in a weird spot where I think we might have a different viewpoint of this if we had like the old transfer portal where Kenyatta's already doing some things and we're like, oh, this is what they're doing. But right now we're just left with nothing. And it's hard to just blindly think that things are going to change when you're trying to do a whole different thing that you've never done before. So prove it.
My favorite thing is how coaches complained about the portal opening right after the season ended, and now they're complaining. Again, we are complaining because it is annoying, but like now they're complaining that the portal is at this point in the calendar, which is a choice that the coaches voted on and made. So It's almost like coaches just complain for complaining's sake.
Yep.
I can't wait to hear Nick Saban complain about the calendar again in the fall or on game day whenever they're talking about it at the playoff, because they'll need to fill 3 hours of programming and Pat McAfee can only take his shirt off once.
Yep, that's true. I don't think I've watched college game day since he took over for Lee Corso.
Not missing anything.
I'm usually in transition to BC or doing something other than watching college football game day because I don't know. Anyways, Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell C. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. You can check out my work at Eagle Insider. We'll obviously, once we start getting some names in the portal, I'll be able to check out film on these guys. Obviously going to have to start looking at Ted Roof's film from Oklahoma. Yikes. So it's going to be a busy time. So just make sure you're tuned into Eagle Insider. Make sure you get it in on the VIP stuff. I think there's probably a sale going on at this time, and you can get all the nuggets as soon as possible.
Yeah. And if you have not followed me on like TikTok or YouTube, or if you're not subscribed here on YouTube, I've done YouTube shorts on every news item. I've been doing them nonstop from my ski cabin that I'm hanging at. It's like an ice storm out here, so I can't even really do anything. But I've been talking about that. So check that out. Again, become part of the Everyday Club. Join us over at Eagle Insider. And we'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.